2. Welcome back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Seen a lot of games around here in many, many moons, and certainly honoring Brian Billick going into the Ring of Honor on Sunday and bringing the Lombardi Trophy out, where I got to admit it got a little dusty up in the upper deck for me. Boy, it certainly ended with a thud. The Baltimore Ravens really pushed around by the Cleveland Browns, and I think as Luke Jones and I sauntered into the losing locker room where lots of players were sort of sauntering around, they did not have a whole lot of answers for what happened to them. Luke, they got pushed around by the Cleveland Browns on Sunday, and it's a little bit of a wake-up call for this organization here at this point at the quarter pole because, you know, they were kind of making it look a little easier than it was, and the Browns didn't look all that good, but they certainly looked pretty good on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, the word that really comes to mind for me is jarring. When you look at it, it's real easy to just point to when you make one big mistake and a team beats you by a field goal or something like that. There's one glaring weakness, but you just kind of look at this one and what exactly did you like from what you saw? I mean, Marlon Humphrey did a nice job on Odell Beckham, the WWE post-play antics aside at one point, but the defense was horrible. Certainly that's the side of the ball that you point to the most. But let's not pretend that the offense was great today. I mean, they scored 18 points and then scored a touchdown in garbage time when it was already out, when, you know, the outcome had been decided. But I think it's unsettling because the Ravens aren't used to being in this position against the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens aren't used to being in this position at home, quite frankly. I mean, this was only the second time in the John Harbaugh era they had ever allowed 40 points at home. Go back to that late December 2013 game against New England. It's only the seventh time in the history of the franchise they've given up 40 points at home. So it's one thing to go on the road to Kansas City and you're playing a well-established, great, historically kind of great offense, and you give up 33 points, you give up over 500 yards, you say, okay, that was not a good performance, clearly. But in the big picture, you'd like to think it's more of a blip on the radar. But then when you come home and you give up over 500 yards and 40 points to an offense that for large stretches of their first three games, the Browns couldn't get out of their own way offensively, that's disconcerting. And I think you're right. I mean, lots of frustration in that post-game locker room, but I don't know if there were necessarily a lot of answers. I think these guys are going back to the drawing board and really searching for it.
Well, I mean, we're going to discuss this all week long and tear it apart. Here come the Steelers, and we got to go up there and short rest for them. All of this stuff that we're going to talk about during the week. But picking this thing apart, player by player, issue by issue. Let's just start with this: the defense, the secondary, the communication, and where we are with leadership on the leadership, not, making plays and who's going to set the edge and all of that, but who's going to hold the thing together and who's going to be a leader on the communication side, because we're seeing communication issues on both sides of the ball, including Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson in the aftermath on the other side. But defensively, it's at the quarter pole now. It's become a way of life. This is the team. There are long, stretches in games where things happen here multiple times that are allowing 30-plus yard gains in one play. It's untenable. You always feel like you're one mistake away from it happening again because it keeps happening.
Yeah, and I think you bring up the leadership question, and one of the more poignant parts of the post-game comments from players, and there were plenty of players being accountable, plenty of guys saying, I need to look at myself. And us as a team, we all need to look each other in the mirror, and we're not going to point fingers, and that's well and good. But the comment that resonated with me was Michael Pierce being at the podium, and at one point he said he was just talking about the defensive leaders. He was talking about defensive leadership, and at one point he said, "You guys know who our defensive leaders are." And I kind of sat there, and I don't mean this with any disrespect to Michael Pierce or to anyone else in that locker room, and that's I'm not attacking anyone's character or fortitude or anything like that. But I sincerely asked myself, who are the leaders on this defense? And what I mean by that is not that there aren't guys that have leadership qualities, but let's be very honest. Who were the leaders on this defense the last few years? Terrell Suggs, C.J. Mosley, Eric Weddle, to varying degrees, depending on which level of the defense and what specifically, and experience, and pregame speeches. That was kind of Suggs' department. Weddle being the traffic cop on the back end. C.J. Mosley kind of being that steadying force in the middle of the defense, and just the down-to-down consistency, week-to-week consistency you got from those guys, even if they weren't tremendous players every single week. And certainly we talked about that throughout the offseason, but when you're going through something like this now, where the defense, the pass defense has been an issue for 3 straight games now. They were good situationally against Arizona, but they gave up 350 yards to a rookie quarterback in his first road start. That was kind of the first red flag that you thought, okay, maybe it's just the weird air raid 4-wide offense. I mentioned Kansas City a little bit earlier, where there's no shame in struggling against the Chiefs on the road, but now it happens again. And who are you turning to right now? Who in that defensive meeting room are you leaning on and is telling everyone, hey, guys, we're going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. Who's that guy that you're leaning on in that context? Because it was Terrell Suggs. It was Eric Weddle, probably to a little bit lesser degree, but still it was C.J. Mosley. And now, who are you leaning on in that context? And I certainly think there are guys who exude some of those qualities, but now it's real. Now we're not talking about it in May OTAs when guys are running around in shorts and Tony Jefferson or Matt Judon or Earl Thomas being the newcomer or Marlon Humphrey, whoever. It's real now. It's not just talking about that.
Well, that's what I talked about with Earl Thomas in the postgame. It's sort of like, okay, we're like into this thing here. Where is the communication? And I think that was the issue on the back end, and that's continued to be the issue. And look, man, we're going to talk about it until we don't, right? Because this has become a trend at this point on the backside of the secondary, and this is what Earl Thomas was brought in here to be a better player and as good a communicator as Eric Weddle, and that hasn't been the case so far, and I think he'd be the first to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I also think it's tricky to just assume that someone that's brand new coming in, now he's not brand new in the league, of course, but someone brand new coming in, I would say, okay, because I mentioned Eric Weddle, and I get it, he was a free agent acquisition, but I would say that Eric Weddle probably took on a much greater leadership role in year 2 and year 3, for example. My point is, if that's the guy you're pointing to, then I'm not sure how well that's working out. But I want to be very clear about this. Yeah, communication was part of it, but this team missed tackles on Sunday. They didn't execute either. This was just bad all the way around. Like I said, if you want to hang your hat on Marlon Humphrey doing a pretty darn good individual job on Odell Beckham, the fact that Beckham didn't have a catch through 3 quarters, you can kind of look at that, sure, but
I'm looking at the final score. I'm looking at, really the tone of all of it, right? And what it means for the future now that, I would just say, now we got a season again here. Now we're on the struggle again. Now the Browns are in first place for, I don't know, Darryl Ryder was telling me the first time since 2014 or some pathetic thing. But now you play catch up with them, and now you have to go on the road up to Pittsburgh where who knows what we're going to find. I don't know what we're going to get on Sunday at this point. And I think this is one of the concerns of so much turnover that you pointed out is, week to week, I don't know what this team is right now. We sort of knew what we were in the Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. And, you get set adrift sometimes. And certainly the franchise, for what it went through at the end of the Flacco era, whether it was his injury or whether it was everything that happened after that and draft picks that don't work out and all of that, and this excitement of Lamar, very, very difficult to sustain it, though, isn't it?
Well, I think it speaks to having a younger team. Let's be honest here. This team doesn't have a ton of high level veteran players that are established. They have some really talented young players. They have a bunch of guys on their defense right now that were either kind of the role players that have stepped into bigger roles, like Patrick Owasso or Tony Jefferson, now into more of a leadership role. Certainly Marlon Humphrey played at an elite level last year, but he's still only in his third year. I mean, you kind of just go down the list. You don't have that 10-year vet on the defensive side of the ball that is just Mr. Dependable for you. I mean, Earl Thomas kind of fits that description of buying that and bringing that in, but that he didn't do that stuff here. So it's just different in that regard. And then on the offensive side, I mean, other than Marshall Yanda and Mark Ingram, who, again, another newcomer, you're talking about a bunch of first and second year guys, which, to be very clear, that's not a bad thing in the big picture.
It's kind of what we wanted around here, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But this is why I said throughout the offseason, I talked about the volatility of this football team, or what I anticipated the volatility being from the standpoint of, I think the upside is very clear to see. You have a second-year quarterback who's made strides. Was he fantastic on Sunday? No. Was he the reason they lost the game Sunday? No, of course not. Not even close. But you just have so many new parts, old parts fitting into much bigger roles. I mean, it's just there's a lot going on there, and that's why I said I thought this team had a higher ceiling than in recent years, but I also said that the floor is probably a little bit lower. Well, Sunday was an example of the floor being lower because there was nothing they could really hang their hats on. I mean, they ran the ball well. They did that exceptionally well, but even in a big spot, and look, he's been great, and I'm not going to bury him for it. It was their first turnover of the year, but look at how much that Mark Ingram fumble ended up hurting them on a drive where they were moving the ball so well. So, but there just wasn't a whole lot that you could really point to on Sunday and say they're going to be okay for that reason. There were some glimpses of that. And,
well, I called it a well-earned loss because, I mean, they deserved to lose, and they lost big, and now there's a response part of this, right? Like, it's because we're sitting here all week, and we don't know. They did not have answers, right? And communication, all right, you figure that out, but are you good enough? You know that's the next question. Are you good enough? And look, Brandon Williams not being there, we questioned as to what value that had. I remember 2 years ago he wasn't in that period of games from London on, a couple of games after that, and they really struggled in the middle. You know, they struggled in the middle. I mean, giving up yardage, big plays, nobody can catch Chubb. Some guys didn't even want to chase Chubb, right?
Yeah, well, and they struggled off the edge too. I mean, it was just there was so little I can really point to on the defense. And look, I'll rewatch it, and I'm sure I'll get a couple tweets from people saying, I thought so-and-so played very well, and that might be well and good.
Yeah,
but,
Wormley batted down a pass, and there were, certainly some, I would say Kenny Young made a couple of plays, right? I mean, there were some flashes in there at various points. I mean, you noticed a couple of players, right?
Sure, but I'd even say I believe it was Kenny Young on the first touchdown to Seals Jones who completely got caught up in a pick play and just just stopped. I mean, he didn't even compete after that happened. I believe that was him. So Tyus Bowser had the sack on the opening drive, and he was the one who did a poor job setting the edge on the 88-yard touchdown run for Nick Chubb. So there just wasn't a whole lot to really hang your hat on and say, okay, this and this wasn't good, but this was good. I mean, the defense was just bad across the board. I mean, they gave up a ton of yards on the ground. They couldn't cover tight ends to save their lives. Lots of broken tackles. They had busted assignments. They, as well as Marlon Humphrey did on Odell Beckham. Look at the day that Jarvis Landry had, despite the fact that he left the game early. He had over 160 yards receiving. I mean, Ricky Seals-Jones, they made him look like a hybrid of Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates. I mean, it was poor, and it's jarring seeing a Ravens defense play like that at home against a non-blue blood kind of team. Yeah, okay, over the years, yeah, did Peyton Manning do that to them on occasion? Sure. Has Tom Brady done that to them? Sure. We saw Patrick Mahomes do it last week. So I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but it is really rare when that happens, especially at home, and well,
you get the feeling you're going to be seeing more Baker Mayfield around here. Like, he's going to be – I said that to Zeus in the aftermath. Like, that dude looks like he's going to be coming in here and pissing us off for the next 5 to 8 years, and you're going to have to figure out a way to beat him, right?
Yeah, and I think part of this was there very much was the Browns lying in the weeds kind of narrative to this game. I mean, they needed this one desperately. They couldn't afford to go fall 1-3, 2 games behind the Ravens in the division, and the tiebreaker for the time being. And it was really a case where the Ravens had a chance to kind of not leave everyone in the dust. It's a little too soon for that, but we talked about it before the game. I mean, this was the kind of opportunity where you thought the Ravens might be able to go 2006 on this one, where if you remember that year, they won the division by 4 or 5 games. It wasn't close. Pittsburgh was down. Cincinnati was meh, and the Browns were the Browns.
Well, you don't get a chance to catch the Browns now until Christmas. Like literally, you'll see them again at Christmas, and now you're gonna scoreboard watch literally while a tie is you're behind, and then you've got to go out there on what figures to be kind of a gnarly kind of day 3 days before Christmas, and you're 7-6, they're 8, so whatever those numbers are. But nobody's going to be 11-2, right? But it feels like it's going to be these two teams, and based on Sunday here, the Browns are the better team right now. For the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about that. And they've got their work cut out for them, too. They have some really tough games coming down the line next 2 weeks.
Right. And for me, it's not even about the scoreboard watching part at this point. I think it's much more how the Ravens have looked the last couple of weeks, where, I mean, I don't know.
You're not in Miami anymore.
Right. No, I mean, we say that in jest, and we've made so much fun of the Dolphins, and rightfully so. I mean, losing on Sunday to, a team that didn't have 2/3 of its starting offense.
Yeah, dude, it was a hell of a trip. We went down there, we had some barbecue late on the beach, 159-10, came home and thought we were good, right? And now here we are.
And that's not to say that the Ravens aren't going to be a really good team before it's all said and done.
Well, they're 1-2 since they left the parking lot.
Yeah, and it's disconcerting what we've seen. I mean, it really is. And I mean, you mentioned it. Cleveland has a hell of a schedule coming up here over the next 4 or 5 weeks. The Ravens, next 2 games, going to Pittsburgh. Who knows? I mean, it's really such. You almost tear down the narratives of what Ravens Steelers used to be, and it's almost like a clean slate at this point, right?
Yeah, it's 2 new teams. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger's not going to beat the Ravens at Sunday at 1 o'clock, right? That's not going to happen.
There's no Terrell Suggs. There's no Joe Flacco. There's no Ben Roethlisberger. There's no Antonio Brown. I mean, it is. So who knows? But
there's no Le'Veon Bell.
Right, but the point is, the Ravens are going to have 2 division opponents the next 2 weeks, both of them with losing records, and both of them, Pittsburgh will see. I have no faith that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be anything resembling relevant this year, but the Ravens have a chance here to right themselves, and Cleveland's going to have a heck of a time the next 3 games against teams with winning records. But again, this is much more a look in the mirror kind of performance and look in the mirror aftermath where what exactly is this team right now? I know they have a really talented quarterback who has taken some strides. There's no question about that. Even if, the talk of MVP after a week or two, you pump the brakes on that. But
the ultimate question on that is you can win with him. You can win with him.
Sure,
you can win this way.
But the question is, can you win with him in this offense as much as it's played well against bad teams and has certainly flashed spectacular plays and certainly runs the ball really well, but can you win as it's currently constructed with the below-average defense, which is what they have right now? We have to call a spade a spade. This is not a good defense right now. They are much closer to being a plain bad defense than being a top 5 kind of defense. So
it says 40 on a scoreboard, and it wasn't because of run backs or short fields or I mean, it was 600 yards offense up and down the field, literally, right?
Yeah, and I guess we touched on this briefly, but part of this for me that just is a little more concerning is the fact that with 10 minutes to go, this was a 6-point game. I mean, Mark Andrews scores the touchdown, catches a touchdown from Lamar Jackson. They go for 2, down 14, another analytics kind of move right there, and they get it. They're down 6 points, and you're thinking, okay, a touchdown, and they're in the lead. And not only does the defense not give up a stop, but they give up an 88-yard touchdown. I mean, it's it's unthinkable. That's just not Ravens football right there, and that's something that so many players echoed after the game. I heard Michael Pierce say that. I heard Judon say that. I heard Tony Jefferson say that. I mean, go down the list. I mean, these guys were absolutely embarrassed by how they played, but I think it's a little unsettling when they were down 2 scores and their offense had a great drive. They scored a touchdown, 14 plays, 75 yards. That drive took up over 6 minutes. So from that standpoint, the defense should have been rested. They should have had a few moments to collect themselves and say, okay, our offense just scored. It's a 6-point game. We're fine, guys. Let's go out there and get them off the field, whether it's a 3-and-out or they pick up a first down or 2, no big deal. And then you just give up an 88-yard touchdown. And from that point on, I mean, that's all she wrote after that. I mean, and you saw on the following drive, I mean, John Harbaugh told us everything we needed to know about how he thinks about his offense right now, or his defense right now. They went for 3rd and 6 from their own 28-yard line. I mean, it's not good right now, and that's not to say they can't.
Well, he's afraid to put his defense on the field, right? Like what?
Yeah,
you got to sort of close your eyes and like, hey, what might happen here, right?
Yeah, but you just think about it under normal circumstances. Now, believe me, you're down 2 scores there. You're behind the 8 ball. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you're not in good shape, but in that context, when it's 4th and 3 with 8:19 to go, you're punting the ball if you feel you have any confidence at all in your defense to get a stop, and John Harbaugh didn't. And I agreed with his decision there. Now, they didn't get it, and at that point the game's over because they're giving up a field goal, and then on the next drive, Lamar kind of out of desperation, and frankly, they needed a couple desperation plays if they were going to have any shot. Throws the interception, and then Cleveland, they end up scoring again. 2 drives later, so it's just not very good and a really poor finish to the game, and I think that's what's a little more unsettling about it. That hey, they've had plenty of games that they've been able to win, even against this football team. I mean, for as much as the Ravens have dominated against Cleveland, I mean, they were 19-3 against the Browns in the John Harbaugh era. I looked it up. The last 15 games they played against them, which the Ravens have won 12 of those, 10 of those were by 1 score. So it tells you that as dreadful, miserable, pathetic, whatever adjective you want to describe the Cleveland Browns as being, the 1999 and on Cleveland Browns, they've played the Ravens pretty tough over the last 6-7 years, with a few exceptions. So the Ravens have had some games where they didn't play well against the Browns, and inevitably they'd hang in there, they'd make a couple plays, and then what would happen on the other side? The Browns would do something to brown it up, right? I mean, you always waited for that, but instead it's kind of the opposite, right? I mean, the Ravens kind of played the part of the Browns in the fourth quarter. So,
well, when it was 24-18, it felt to me like the Browns were going to brown, and then 88 yards later, then it felt like, ooh, this isn't going well.
Yeah, that felt, it felt like in the past that would have been, I don't know, Ray Rice or Justin Forsett or Alex Collins or whoever breaking a few tackles and then being off to the races. I mean, but it was the Browns. And, hey, I'll say this begrudgingly, you have to give them a lot of credit because that was a team that was kind of on the brink, being 1-2 and not playing well. And
well, you talk about a team with no pedigree here. How about over there?
Yeah, exactly. 3/4 of their starting secondary was out. And
they always collapse when they're 1-2 and go to 1-3, right? They never right the ship.
That's just what they do. That's what they do. Well, a lot of years they don't even get to 1-2. So, I mean, you have to give them credit. I mean, to your point, they weren't just the better team. They were much better.
Yeah, it's not your father's Browns right now, but I don't know that they're a Super Bowl team, but I know they were a better team than the Ravens were on Sunday. I want to get a few plugs in here. On Monday night, we're going to be at Adams Jeep with Nick Boyle. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry, also talking about soft side and show your soft side. Sandy Reset will not be out, but Nick Boyle will be discussing the love of animals with me, as well as recapping what was a difficult afternoon for everybody involved with the Baltimore Ravens and a kind of a hideous 40-25 loss to the Cleveland Browns. Baltimore positive, alive, and well all week long. Don Moeller and I going doubleheader this week, just like wild cards. Wednesday morning, 11 a.m., we're going to be at Fadley's with John Sarbanes. Thursday at 10 a.m. We're going to be with Ben Carden over at State Fair in Catonsville, so I'll get a good breakfast there. That's on the 3rd. So this week, not just wild card baseball, not just our live show, our Purple Live show at Adams Jeep with Nick Boyle, but also doing 2 Baltimore positives. Also getting back after Baltimore positive next week with Bill Ferguson at Fadley's on the 10th. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and everywhere we are. Luke is going to be out in Owings Mills trying to make tops or bottoms of all of this. I'm getting some recaps from Cleveland. We're going to Pittsburgh. We'll get a look at the Steelers this week. Also going to do a little bit of baseball this week. Don't know if you heard, but John Angelos had to answer one of my questions last week. I have not talked about that or written about that. I'll be doing that a little later on here this week. Luke at WNST.net finds him. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. And, we're 2-2, and the Browns won, and we're going to be breaking it down, and nobody's going to be feeling real good about that around here this week, but does make for quite the season. It does make for every week being a scrap around here and looking down on the schedule and saying, oh, Cleveland is coming. That's just an easy win. I'm done talking like that. We're also going to recap Coach Billick going into the Ring of Honor and a huge weekend of fun. I was out on social media hanging out with some old friends, Jack Del Rio, Kim Herring, Lionel Dalton. I saw Kyle Richardson. I saw Femi Abadejo. I saw all sorts of people, all the legends, all the Purple Jackets. Love the Purple Jacket on Coach Billick as well. All right, more with Luke, more with me, more with all that we're doing around here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.